The series begins with a true story about one of the strangest and most terrifying crimes in America's history during the 1950s. It became a source of inspiration for many horror film directors because of how gruesome the crime was, leaving the public completely shocked and horrified by his actions, especially since he always appeared to be a quiet, introverted, peaceful man by everyone's account. But behind that calm mask, he was hiding a monster with no heart and no mercy. The story starts with Ed Gein, known as Ed, a quiet, simple young man living in his house with his mother Augusta and his brother Henry in the small American town of Plainfield. They had a farm where he took care of the animals, and after finishing his work there, he would sneak into one of the houses in town and peek through the door, crack at two girls named Madison and Adeline. But accidentally, he made a sound that startled them, and both Adeline and Madison got scared and left the room to see where the noise came from, only to find no one in the house. The next day, Augusta walks into Ed's room and finds him wearing her clothes, so she decides to punish him. It's clear that Augusta is strict, harsh, and extremely religious, so much that she tells Ed that women are destined for hell because they represent sin on earth, warning him never to get close to any woman so he wouldn't fall into sin. And since Ed has a very weak personality and is deeply attached to his mother, he obeys her without any discussion or hesitation. The next day, Ed is sitting in a cafe and sees two girls sitting next to him. He tries to talk to them and get to know them, but they get annoyed and leave. At that moment, Adeline arrives and sits with Ed, apologizing for being late, and we learn that they already know each other and have been meeting before. During their conversation, Adeline tells Ed about the Nazi camps and that one of her friends is dating a Nazi soldier. To impress her, she showed him pictures of the corpses, and Ed stared at them with intense focus, his eyes filled with a strange kind of fascination, as if the sight of the bodies pleased him. Adeline also had a magazine with her that featured an article about the serial killer Ilse Koch, and Ed read it carefully, focusing on every detail of the crimes she had committed. We learned that Ilse was a German Nazi woman who tortured Jewish prisoners with tattoos on their bodies so she could skin them and use their tattooed flesh to make household items like lampshades and chairs. That night, Ed sat alone in his room with the magazine, continuing to read about Ilse's horrific crimes. The next day, Henry came to the farm, and Ed told him their mother would be furious because he'd been gone for a week. But Henry didn't care. His personality was strong and completely different from Ed's. He told Ed that he was in love with a woman named Jenny and had decided to marry her. Ed was shocked and told him their mother would never approve because Jenny had been divorced twice. But Henry didn't care and said he was tired of their mother's strictness and control, that it felt like they were living in a prison with her. He advised Ed not to let himself be controlled by their mother because she would keep him trapped forever and make his life miserable. Henry then said he was leaving for good and told Ed he should leave too because their mother was mentally ill and insane. Ed got angry and told him not to talk about their mother like that. Henry tried to calm him down, saying he felt sorry for him because he'd become as strange and disturbed as their mother, and he didn't want to see him end up that way. He told him again to leave the house and live his own life. But before Henry could go, Ed grabbed a large tree branch and struck him on the head with it. Ed thought Henry was fine and tried to talk to him, telling him to get up from the ground, but he froze in shock and fear when he saw the blood flowing from Henry's head, and he ran out of the farm in terror. He looked at him from afar and imagined that Henry was still alive and had gotten up from the ground. That night, during dinner, Augusta and Ed prayed before eating, and Ed asked her if she had seen Henry. She told him she hadn't seen him for a week and had heard he was with that divorced woman, Jenny. Because Jenny was a woman with no morals, Augusta decided to disown Henry and forget she ever had a son by that name. She told Ed that no one would ever love him like his mother did and asked him not to break her heart the way Henry and his father did. Ed smiled and promised her he would never hurt her. The next day, Ed went to the farm and found Henry lying dead on the ground. He broke down, hit himself with a pen, and told Henry he thought he had been dreaming because he never meant to do that to him. Then we see Ed dragging Henry's body out of the farm, placing a tree trunk over him and setting the body on fire. He then ran back to the house, shouting for his mother, telling her he saw Henry in the middle of a fire and couldn't control the flames. Augusta rushed to call the police and the fire department. When the firefighters arrived, they put out the fire and found Henry's body. Ed acted shocked and devastated. When Augusta saw her son's dead body in front of her eyes, she was overwhelmed with grief and screamed and cried uncontrollably. Ed saw his mother collapsing in sorrow and told her that he knew she had always loved Henry more than him, but Henry didn't deserve her sadness because he wasn't a loyal son. He promised her he would be the devoted son she deserved and would take care of her for the rest of his life. At that moment, Augusta suffered a stroke. Ed carried her to the hospital, where the doctor told him she wouldn't be able to move or speak and needed to take an aspirin pill every day. Ed then brought his mother back home, now sitting in a wheelchair, and we see him taking care of her and looking after her. The next day, Ed is once again reading about Ilse Koch and how she tortured her victims under the claim that they were Jews who deserved punishment. She even held large parties for the most important people in town to show them how she tortured her victims. At that moment, Ed heard his mother calling him. She was dressed and wanted to go visit Daniel Smith, the man who sold them hay for their farm. When they arrived, Daniel was arguing with his lover Sally because he wanted to get rid of her dog. Augusta lost her temper and told Sally she was an immoral woman for living with a man without marriage and that she deserved eternal torment in hell. Suddenly, in that same moment, Augusta suffered another stroke and collapsed to the ground, ending her life. Later, we see Ed devastated, lying beside his mother's grave, refusing to leave. When he finally returned home, he stood staring at the house, unable to imagine how he would live there alone without her. When he saw her chair, the one no one was ever allowed to sit on, he decided to try sitting in it. But suddenly, he heard his mother's voice yelling at him to get up from it. The next day, we see Ed tending to the farm, and that night he hears his mother's voice speaking to him, telling him that he can bring her back to life so he won't be lonely anymore. Ed then went to the cemetery and dug into his mother's grave, trying to pull her out, but he couldn't. To him, she was something sacred that shouldn't be disturbed. Then he heard her voice again, asking him to dig up the grave of the woman buried next to her. So Ed opened the grave beside his mother's and took the buried woman out. He brought her home, cleaned the dirt off her body, undressed her, and sat her on his mother's chair. The next day, Ed was driving his tractor when he suddenly imagined the dead rising from their graves. Terrified, he rushed back home, slammed the door behind him, and heard his mother's voice again. He told her that the dead knew what he had done. He was terrified, but her voice calmed him, telling him that none of it was real and that it was all just in his head. After that, we see Ed sitting at the table eating while imagining his mother sitting across from him. She tells him that he's in bad shape, unable to take care of himself or the house. He tells her that he needs a woman to live with him, but his mother gets angry and tells him that no woman is allowed to enter the house, especially Adeline, because she's immoral like all other women. Ed responds defiantly, telling her that she's gone now and can't stop him or punish him anymore. Later, Ed goes out with Adeline and they play a skating game together. She asks him if he's ever thought about leaving the town because she feels trapped there and dreams of going to New York to meet WG, the famous photographer who captures puppet theater scenes. She says she wants to be like him, to learn photography from him and become famous. Ed then tells her that he saw a picture of Ilse making a bowl out of human skulls, and he decided to do the same. Adeline laughs, thinking he's joking, but that upsets Ed. He tells her that she can come to his house and see the bowl for herself. Adeline then goes with Ed to his house and notices that as they arrive, he looks toward the window and gestures to someone. She asks him who he's signaling to, and Ed tells her he was waving to his mother. Adeline looks confused, and we learn that no one in town knows Augusta is dead. The town is small, sparsely populated, and the Gein family isn't well liked or known by anyone because of Augusta's isolation. When Ed and Adeline enter the house, she notices how dark it is and asks him to turn on the lights. Suddenly, Ed moves closer to her, lights a match, and uses it to ignite the candles scattered around the house. Adeline comments that the place is dirty and needs cleaning. Ed tells her that ever since his mother got sick, the house hasn't been cleaned. Adeline decides to help him tidy up and soon notices a saw sitting in the sink. Ed tells her he was just about to wash it, then says he wants to introduce her to his mother so he can tell her how much he loves her and that she's the only person who truly understands him. Adeline smiles happily, but as they go up the stairs, she suddenly smells something terrible, like the odor of something rotten. She notices a strange chair made of skin, and Ed tells her he made it himself. When she asks what kind of skin it is, he says that every animal has a different kind of skin, but we understand it's human skin. Then he takes Adeline to his mother's room, where she sees Augusta sitting in her chair, facing away. Adeline starts talking to her, but she's surprised when Augusta doesn't respond or move. She asks Ed if his mother is asleep, and at that moment, Fear overwhelms her. She runs down the stairs, trying to leave the house, telling Ed that there's something not right there. Ed asks if they'll meet again, but Adeline doesn't answer. She rushes out and leaves. Ed slams the door angrily and starts arguing with his mother, saying she made Adeline upset and drove her away. He imagines his mother standing before him, telling him that Adeline is one of those sinful, unfaithful women from the streets, and she won't allow him to be involved with someone like that. Ed warns her not to interfere in his life again because he loves Adeline and won't stay away from her. After that, Ed leaves the house with his rifle and goes to a bar. There, he talks with Mary, one of the workers, and tells her that her body, height, and appearance are very similar to his mother's. Mary looks uncomfortable and clearly upset. Ed goes to the bathroom, and when he comes out, he imagines the bar as one of Ilse's twisted parties. He sees Mary serving drinks to guests and apologizes to her for comparing her to his mother, saying that his mother was pure and virtuous, while Mary is a sinner. In that moment, Ed kills Mary and drags her body across the floor to take her home with him. The next day, 2 police officers named Art and Frank arrive at the bar after the owner reported finding blood at the scene and that Mary was missing. He tells them the last person seen at the bar the previous night was Ed Gein. Meanwhile, Ed is watching Adeline at her house through the door crack, listening to her arguing with her mother, who wants her to get back with her boyfriend, Randy. Ed leaves the flowers he brought for her in front of the door and walks away sadly. The next day, Ed remembers his father, George, and his constant fights with Augusta because he used to drink and come home late. When he once slapped her during an argument, she threw him out of the house. Ed also remembers what his mother told him back then. She warned him never to get close to any woman or get married because she didn't want his children to live a life of misery like his. Then we see Ed cleaning the house while wearing his mother's clothes. We learn that he had skinned Mary's face to wear it as a mask, convincing himself that his mother was still there since Mary looked so much like her. At that moment, someone knocks on the door, so Ed quickly changes his clothes and opens it to find officers Frank and Art standing there. They ask him about Mary and when he last saw her. Ed tells them he saw Mary last week at the bar, but Art finds it strange because their information says Ed was there the previous night. Ed denies leaving the house, saying he spent the entire night beside his sick mother. He pretends to be worried about Mary and asks if something happened to her. They tell him that someone shot her at the bar, and unfortunately, she's still missing, as if she disappeared completely. Later, Ed goes to sit in the cafe and Adeline joins him, apologizing for running away so suddenly that night because she got scared. But she told him she was surprised by how messy the house was, especially his mother's room, since Augusta didn't move at all. Ed replied that he had argued with his mother because of her, and Adeline apologized for being rude that day. That night, we see Ed at the cemetery digging up a woman's grave. He breaks her arm and takes the ring she was wearing to give it to Adeline. The next day, Ed takes Adeline out, and she's surprised when she realizes he's brought her to the cemetery. He has set up a small spot with candles and tells her he feels this is a special place to propose. He then takes out the ring and asks her to marry him. Adeline is happy and accepts, but she tells him the ring is a little loose on her finger. Ed casually replies that the woman who owned the ring before had thicker fingers. Adeline is puzzled by his answer, but Ed quickly covers up, saying he meant the woman he bought it from. At that moment, Adeline tries to get close to him, but he stops her and tells her that his mother taught him never to be with any woman before marriage and warned him never to have children, saying he wouldn't be able to raise them like his father couldn't. Adeline tells him that's not true and promises she'll help him learn how to handle children and get used to them. The next day, Adeline goes to see a woman from town named Heller, and Ed goes with her because Heller needed a babysitter. Adeline suggests Ed for the job, and Heller tells them that her sons, Frank and Andy, love their old babysitter Evelyn, but she suddenly fell ill and was hospitalized because she couldn't walk or move anymore. Then we see Ed sitting with Frank and Andy, getting to know them, and we find out Heller agreed to hire him as their babysitter. But the boys seem uncomfortable and tell him that Evelyn was much more fun to be around. Ed tells them he knows how to do magic tricks and decides to take them to his house. When Frank and Andy arrive, they immediately comment that the place smells awful. Ed brings out 3 skulls that he has turned into bowls and takes out a finger bone, hiding it under one of them. He tells the boys to guess where it is, and they manage to find it. When they ask if the finger is real, Ed says it is, and that it belonged to an old woman who dropped it while he was walking behind her. Then he asks if they want to see him transform into a woman and change his face. Frank laughs and tells him he's joking because that's impossible. Ed gets up to show them how he can change and puts on Mary's skinned face. The boys are terrified. Later, when Ed brings them back home, Heller and her husband get angry at him for taking their kids without telling them and decide to fire him. A few days later, we see Evelyn, the babysitter, walking down the street with a cane after being discharged from the hospital. At the same time, Ed is watching her, filled with resentment and jealousy because Frank and Andy loved her so much. When Evelyn notices him staring, Ed confronts her and accuses her of being the reason he lost his job and the reason he'll never be able to have a family, saying he wanted to learn how to raise children. Evelyn gets scared and walks away quickly. That night, she returns to work at Heller's house, and the boys are thrilled to see her again. Later, Evelyn dozes off while sitting, and the boys are already asleep. Suddenly, she wakes up after hearing a noise in the house and goes down to the basement when she sees the door open. In that moment, Ed attacks her. The next day, Ed goes to see Adeline and tells her that the time he spent with Frank and Andy made him ready to be a father. Adeline is overjoyed, and later Ed waits outside the house while she tells her mother that he wants to marry her. But he overhears her mother yelling at her, saying she doesn't approve of him and that no one in town likes his family, that they're always distant from people, living in isolation, and nobody knows anything about them. Adeline decides to leave her parents' house, marry Ed, and live with him. Later, at Ed's home, Adeline tells him she'll clean the house and take care of everything. Ed thanks her and tells her he needs to go upstairs to check on his mother. After that, he takes his rifle and goes out hunting for rabbits. A little while later, Adeline steps outside to throw away the trash and hears someone moving inside the house. When she goes back in, she hears knocking sounds again. Thinking Ed's mother might need help, she goes up to her room to check on her. But she finds Augusta sitting in her chair, motionless as always, not saying a word. Adeline decides to get closer, and as soon as she sees her face decomposed and realizes she's looking at a decayed corpse, she screams in terror. Meanwhile, Ed is in the basement with Evelyn, who's naked and tied to a chair. She begs him to let her go, insisting she's done nothing wrong. But Ed is convinced that she cost him his job and ruined his chance to marry Adeline and give her the wedding she dreamed of, since he was depending on that money. Evelyn then notices that Ed is talking to his mother, even though there's no one else in the room, and she becomes terrified when he shows her the body of a woman, telling her it's his mother and that she's going to help him finish her off. He makes his mother hold the hammer with him as he tries several times to kill Evelyn, but fails at first. Evelyn is completely hysterical with fear, and afterward, we see Ed covering her body with gauze as if wrapping her for burial after he finally kills her. Suddenly, Ed hears Adeline screaming and sees her running out of the house, terrified and trying to escape. He chases after her and finds that she's returned to her home. We learn that her mother isn't there at the moment. Ed manages to open the basement door of Adeline's house and sneaks inside through it. He goes up to her room and finds her sitting there, waiting for him. She starts talking to him and asks if the corpse she saw was his mother. Ed tells her that it wasn't his mother's body, but another woman he had dug up from her grave. He confesses that he couldn't bring his mother out of her tomb, so he replaces her with other women who look like her. Adeline asks how his mother died, and Ed says she passed away naturally. Then, Adeline tells him she doesn't understand why people are afraid of death when they're made from dust and return to dust. Later, Ed goes back to his basement, removes the gauze from Evelyn's body, and then heads to a local shop to buy lime. Bernice, the shop owner, is surprised by the amount of lime he's purchasing. So Ed explains that many animals die on his farm and the lime helps their bodies decompose faster. Ed notices that Bernice looks sad and she tells him that he's the only one who treats her kindly. She mentions she's been sick and takes medication. Ed offers to take her out for lunch and she agrees. Later, we see Ed and Bernice sitting together at a restaurant. Bernice talks about her son, Frank, and we learn he's the same police officer, Frank. She seems sad because he never visits her. She also tells Ed about her lover, Bert, who left his wife to live with her, and when the wife found out, she took her own life. Since then, people have considered Bernice an immoral woman, which made her depressed and dependent on medication. Ed listens to Bernice attentively, then goes home with her. Bernice tries to seduce him, and he gives in, ending up sleeping with her. Afterward, Ed tries to tell her that he's in love with a younger woman like her, which makes Bernice angry. She insists that he lock up his house and move in with her. When Ed returns home, he imagines his mother there and tells her he's leaving the house to live with an older woman. His mother tells him he's doing exactly what his brother Henry did, leaving her alone, and asks how he can allow himself to live with a woman who has a bad reputation, who made a married man betray his wife, leading the wife to take her own life. She warns him that Bernice has been with many men and might have a serious disease, and that he'll burn in hell with her because they both committed sin. Ed becomes terrified. Later, he grabs his rifle and goes to Bernice's shop, telling her that his mother told him everything about her, that she's been with many men, that she must be sick and that because of her, he'll burn in hell since she tempted him and made him fall into sin. Bernice is shocked and tells him she's healthy, not sick, and gets angry, ordering him to leave her shop. In that moment, Ed decides to kill Bernice, drags her body across the floor, and leaves. That night, we see two travelers who've lost their way arriving in town near Ed's family farm. They knock on the door, tired and looking for a place to rest, but find the door open. Inside, they see Ed covered in blood, holding a chainsaw, with a corpse lying nearby. The two terrified strangers run, but Ed chases them with the chainsaw, wearing Bernice's skinned face as a mask. He kills both of them brutally with the chainsaw, screaming in a mix of madness, triumph, and twisted joy. After that, Adeline goes with Ed to the farm so he can show her Bernice's body and what he did to her. He makes her photograph the corpse so she can practice crime scene photography, just like she always wanted. Later at home, Ed wears the skin of a dead woman's face, plays music, and dances around the room. Then we see Adeline's mother arguing with her, telling her to focus on her future and find a husband who can take care of her. Adeline mocks her and asks where her own husband is if marriage is so important. She tells her mother she won't work as a seamstress like her and plans to leave the town for good. Her mother slaps her across the face. Later, Adeline is in a hotel room with Randy, and it's clear they're having a secret affair. Randy tells her that people in town talk badly about her, saying she's with a different man every day, including her involvement with Ed Gein. Adeline gets angry and tells him she's leaving the town completely, and when she does, he won't find any woman who would look at him or want him. Afterward, she goes out with Ed and tells him she contacted WG, the crime scene photographer, and got a job interview in New York. She's decided to leave town and move there. Ed is shocked by her decision. On the way, Adeline notices that Ed is taking a different route instead of the road to her house. He tells her he just wants her to spend the night with him since she's leaving anyway. Adeline gets upset and tells him to stop the car. Ed reluctantly stops, and Adeline tells him that she always thought their relationship was special, but realizes it's not working. She apologizes, saying she can't marry him like she promised. That makes Ed furious because he knows no woman will ever want to marry him, and he'll never experience a real relationship or sexual life. Adeline then sarcastically suggests that he should try it with the dead, and Ed agrees immediately, because, in truth, he'd already been thinking about it for a while. After that, Ed and Adeline go to the cemetery and choose the grave of a woman named Eleanor, who had been buried just a few days earlier. Ed decides to take Eleanor's body home to violate it, and we realize at that point that Ed wasn't just a killer, he was completely insane. The next day, we see Adeline in New York, sitting with WG, who tells her he's surprised by how persistent she's been and by the countless messages she's sent him. Adeline tells him she wants to be his assistant, but WG refuses, saying he's worked with many young people before, and they all got disgusted or terrified the moment they saw corpses. Adeline insists she's not afraid of such things, that she actually likes them, and tells him she's photographed a corpse before. She shows him the photos, but WG mocks her, accusing her of faking them, and tells her to leave because she's not talented enough and he'll never hire her. Adeline returns to her rented room and breaks down crying in despair. She goes downstairs to speak with the landlady, telling her that she's so cold that her tears are freezing on her face, and asks for her money back so she can find a place with heating. The landlady refuses to return the money, so Adeline violently hits her with her shoe heel, takes the cash she has, and leaves. She decides to return to her hometown and her mother's house. Once there, her mother tells her that she was upset when she found out she was pregnant with her, because she wasn't ready for a baby at that time. She even threw herself down the stairs to try to end the pregnancy, but it didn't work. That's why, she says, Adeline was born strange and not normal. She urges her to find a husband quickly before she becomes an old spinster. After that, Adeline goes to see Ed and tries to get close to him, wanting to sleep with him because he's the only man who would agree to marry her. But Ed pushes her away and tells her he no longer loves warm, living bodies. He decides to make her body cold like the corpses so he can be close to her. Ed places Adeline in a bathtub and fills it with ice. The next day, Frank goes to his mother Bernice's shop with Art. He's surprised to find she isn't there and starts to worry since she's been missing for several days. Art then notices bloodstains, and Frank is shocked and terrified, fearing the blood might belong to his mother. When they go down to the storage room, they find a gift box labeled "To Ed Gein," and Frank realizes his mother had been involved with Ed. Frank and Art head to Ed's house, where they find the door open and are immediately hit by a horrible stench. The house is filled with flies, filthy, and completely trashed. Inside one room, Frank finds clothes made from human skin and a lampshade also crafted from human skin. They see the masks Ed made from the faces of his victims, and Art notices magazines and books about Ilse Koch. He also finds a human heart prepared for eating. When they see human intestines scattered on the floor, both are horrified and call for backup. The police arrive quickly and start photographing everything inside Ed's house. Meanwhile, Frank rushes to search the farm since no one has checked it yet. He breaks down in complete shock when he finds his mother's body hanging upside down, decapitated. He recognizes her from her socks. At that moment, Ed arrives and asks the officers what they're doing in his house. The police immediately tackle him to the ground, handcuff him, and arrest him. Frank, overcome with rage and grief, attacks Ed and beats him violently for what he did to his mother. But Ed tells them he doesn't understand what they're talking about and insists his mother must be scared because of all the commotion. Art replies that his mother is dead, and Ed freezes in shock, as if he truly believed she was still alive and living with him. Then we see Ed in prison, while the forensic team examines the items found in his house. It's revealed that they discovered forks and plates made from the bones of his victims. Meanwhile, Frank waits outside, anxious for the forensic team to finish because he wants to collect his mother's body for burial. But the coroner informs him they can't release her body yet because several parts are still missing. Then we see Adeline dressing up and fixing her hair before stepping outside to face the journalists gathered in front of her house. She looks pleased with the attention and tells them there was never anything between her and Ed, that he was just someone she met once at the skating rink and occasionally talked to at the cafe, nothing more, and that she had no connection at all to anything the police found in his house. Later, during the interrogation, Ed says there's been a misunderstanding and that the things they found at his place are part of his hobby, which he claims is grave digging. Art asks if he killed Bernice, since they found her organs in his kitchen and her head in his house. But Ed says he doesn't remember and insists he's innocent, claiming someone must have framed him for everything. Art then asks about the boiled heart and whether Ed ate his victims after killing them, especially since townspeople told investigators that Ed used to give them meat, saying it was from deer he hunted. Ed says he doesn't remember doing that either. He suggests they put him on a lie detector test. Then we see Ed hooked up to the machine while Art asks if he killed Mary, Evelyn, and Bernice. Ed replies that he doesn't remember, and Art then asks him about his brother Henry and his death, if Ed was the one responsible for it. Ed also denies that, saying he didn't do anything to him. Everyone is shocked when the lie detector shows that Ed is telling the truth and not lying, leaving them all completely confused. Later, we see that Frank finally receives his mother's body and buries her with Art's help. Then, Thanksgiving Day comes, and Art invites Frank over for dinner. When Frank sees Art cutting the turkey with an electric knife, he suddenly imagines Ed holding his chainsaw and cutting up his mother's body, and he freezes in horror. Sometime later, Frank becomes an alcoholic, constantly drinking. Art confronts him angrily after learning that Frank plans to auction off Ed's house and belongings. Frank explains that he and the families of the other victims decided to do that to get compensation, since Ed is still alive in the mental hospital, living normally as if nothing ever happened. Art tells him that what he's doing is wrong, and that neither their faith nor their morals allow them to profit from something like this. Frank snaps back, saying that if Art's mother had died as brutally as his, he wouldn't be saying that. Later, we see Frank standing in front of Ed's house, now turned into a tourist attraction where people pay money to enter and see the home of the murderer, Ed Gein. Art arrives and tells him again that what he's doing isn't right. Frank replies that the money he's collecting will go toward a charity in his mother's name, and that he's also planning to auction off Ed's car and other possessions. Eventually, Frank learns that a fire broke out at Ed's house, destroying